Eye opener? The call is coming from inside the house. This is a reference to a horror movie where a babysitter keeps getting threatening calls throughout the night. She calls the police, but it isn't until they trace the call that everyone realizes that the calls have been coming from inside the home. I use this reference because I think it's very relevant given the latest news related to the Posse Comitatus Act. First, a little background, which actually should indicate the trouble that we may be facing soon in America. The Posse Comitatus Act is a United States federal law that was signed on June 18, 1878 by President Rutherford B. Hayes. It limits the powers of the federal government in the use of federal military personnel to enforce domestic policies within the United States. Congress passed the act as an amendment to an Army appropriation bill following the end of Reconstruction and updated it in 1956, 1981, and 2021. Basically, this act prohibits using U.S. military against U.S. citizens in the U.S. Sounds reasonable, right? Well, whether reasonable or not, the Department of Defense Directive 5240.01, titled DoD Intelligence and Intelligence-Related Activities and Defense Intelligence Component Assistance to law enforcement agencies and other civil authorities allows for the suspension of Posse Comitatus. Apparently, our government views Americans as the threat from within, and they feel it necessary to have the capability to put any of us down as it sees fit. Does this sound like the bastion of freedom that American leaders claim the United States to be? Or does this sound like one of those countries portrayed in the movies where the citizens get mowed down for protesting and having dissenting opinions? So, one of two things is true here. Either American citizens are the threat from within or our leaders are. In my opinion, it must be the latter because, in a just and fair society, the will of the majority must take precedence of that of the minority. This I claim because if instead it is the will of the minority that rules, the ideals of that nation are no longer sustainable. For instance, let's say the less than 1,000 people that head up the executive, judicial, and legislative branches of government in the United States of America. That would be the President, Supreme Court, and the Congress, respectively. If that group decides to conduct wars all over the planet year after year, to the point that America not only loses its standing in the world as the world's police, but its ability to actually make the world a safer place through diplomacy or force. Should their will supersede the will of the majority? Should that majority oppose intervention? What if their will results in such negative outcomes as greater poverty and homelessness? What if their will is to sanction so many other countries that new economic entities arise, resulting in even further increases in poverty and homelessness? To be quite honest, I don't even need to point to these, let's say, hypothetical situations. I can simply refer to the recent spike in illegal immigration and the resulting issues and conflicts. With the influx of millions into the United States and the burden that it has placed on the flailing and failing U.S. economy, is it no wonder that American citizens are complaining about not receiving the assistance that so many of them need? Even if these illegal immigrants were not being put up in nice hotels and given $10,000 debit cards, Americans would still be right to protest the lack of services that their tax dollars no longer seem to pay for. Even if the crimes that the illegal immigrants are committing weren't spiking, Americans would still be right to complain about the fact that they too will soon have to break laws just to feed their families. Even if the legal immigrants, I will say it again, legal immigrants were complaining about the illegal immigrants flooding into this country, American citizens would still be right in complaining. They would be labeled as racist, but they would still be right. As for why all of these people are willing to leave their homeland and brave the dangers that such a journey entails, we've all heard about the instances of extortion, indentured servitude, rapes, and murders. And we must all suspect and wonder about the role that America played in the ruination of countries around the globe and those that share a border with the U.S. We do, after all, intervene in the affairs of almost if not all countries on the map, so we must have been a part of the success, or more often failure, of those places. This, however, was and will be covered in other stories, so we won't get into them here. What I will say about this, however, is that the majority of Americans would probably not have agreed to all of the American adventurism that has occurred over the past few decades, but that minority of less than 1,000 people in Washington, D.C. did, and look at where that has gotten us. All of the profit made from endless war has only served to make those who make the weapons richer and the rest of us poorer. Our country is currently in decline, and we simply look like bullies who can't have won a fight, militarily or economically, in decades, and things are only getting worse as the world seeks alternatives to American hegemony. With the increase in wealthy inequality, our leaders have shown their disdain for us, and now that we are reciprocating that sentiment, they are turning the weapons our tax dollars paid for back on us. Ain't that a bitch? To find out other ways you're being screwed by your current leaders, check out the posts on this blog daily. Learn about the biggest and worst issues that America and its people face today. You can also learn about those issues that America and its people will face in the near and distant future. If, however, you would like to learn about possible solutions to either mitigate the worst impacts of these issues or solutions to avoid them altogether, keep listening. The problems we face are not as complicated as so many leaders and news reports claim. They are man-made and are only claimed as complicated so those who are responsible can maintain control. For example, there is a persistent argument that moving government is like turning a cruise ship around. It is supposedly a long process that can only be achieved incrementally. While this may be true for laws and policies that benefit the majority of Americans, it does not seem to be so for that smallest of American minorities. When one examines the policies and laws that benefit that minority known as the elite or the rich, the speed at which those laws are passed is exponentially faster. While most of us sit on the deck chairs waiting for the Titanic to avoid the myriad of icebergs of which we seem to continually run afoul, the elite ride comfortably in speedboats. If, according to our Constitution, all men are created equal, why do the rich live quite different lives than the rest of us? Where is our speedboat? In 2018, Chris Osman wrote a book highlighting the problems humanity would face if more power, wealth, and control were funneled to a small cohort of individuals, groups, or organizations. In that book, Mr. Osman provided solutions, from himself and others, to the inevitable problems we would all face. In it, he also provided a means for the public to analyze, compare, and contrast the words and deeds of those we've chosen to follow against our real-world experiences. To this end, Mr. Osman provides the means for readers to disseminate information as provided by their news sources of choice, their elected officials, and any other authority they choose to follow. The book, titled Solutions, Enough Complaining. Let's Fix America, offers a means to hold leaders up to, not just a higher standard than is currently accepted, but one that will improve lives. If 5240.01 stands, we might literally have shot ourselves in the foot, or at least paid to shoot ourselves in the foot. Click the link below and get your copy today.